between 1 and 2 women every week are killed by a male partner. Young men will get sent things about violence, misogyny, Andrew Tate style content, Fresh and Fit podcast, that kind of stuff that is the kind of on-ramp towards misogyny. They don't even look for it. If we haven't got men that are willing to talk about how damaging male violence against women and girls is, to talk about different forms of masculinity with young men, to talk about how important it is to open up ourselves and our feelings and kind of access our feelings and be vulnerable, they would call it weak, because that's what they've been groomed to believe online, that, you know, showing any form of emotion is weakness. It's like we've gone back kind of 130 years or something. If we're expecting women teachers to talk to young men who've been radicalised towards misogyny about sexism and misogyny and the gender pay gap, and they've already been told it's rubbish, that women lie about false accusation, they're not going to listen, and it's actually going to make it work. Culture is defined by the worst behaviour we tolerate. So if men can create cultures where other men are openly misogynistic and horrible to women and, you know, sexist and abusive towards women, then we as men are responsible for creating cultures within which that doesn't happen.
Welcome to Trust Matters Lessons in Leadership, the podcast exploring the innovations, challenges, and leadership shaping trust and schools today. In this episode, we're joined by someone who's made it his mission to spark honest conversations with young people and educators alike, Andrew Bernie Bernard. Bernie is a speaker, writer, and workshop leader whose work in schools draws on personal experience to challenge harmful ideas about masculinity, coercive control, and violence against women and girls. As voices from the manosphere grow louder online, and with shows like Adolescence sparking national debate, his message has never been more timely. In this episode, we explore how schools and trust can respond, how to engage boys without blame, and why empathy might just be the most powerful skill that we can teach. Please note that this episode contains references to domestic violence, coercive control, misogyny, and gender-based violence, which some listeners may find distressing. If you do need support, you can find a list of organisations in the description below. With that in mind, we move into a conversation that is honest, powerful, and deeply rooted in the belief that trust in schools can play a vital role in creating safer futures for all young people. Right, welcome, Bernie.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. So your career has spanned enterprise education, writing, advocacy.
Yeah.
Was there a moment that you switched and all of a sudden had a reason to become so passionate about masculinity and violence against women and girls?
Well, here's a trigger warning.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about what happened to my sister, Sarah. In 2010, she left her husband and children to go and move in with a man she'd met online on kind of Facebook motorbike forums. And she became very isolated from the family. To be honest, Sarah and I didn't really get on. So we would send each other's, kids Christmas and birthday presents and things. But we were kind of distant anyway. And then we weren't hearing from each other at all. And my mum was kind of worried about what was going on. But she thought this new guy was absolutely lovely. And then we got a phone call on the 25th of February 2012 saying that she'd died. And I mean, it was my mum that phoned me up, and I kind of did what I suppose everyone would. Are you joking, aren't you? I think a lot of people would go, what are you on about? Sarah's fine. And it turns out that the accident, my mum called it, she'd been in a relationship with a controlling, violent and abusive man, and he'd fatally stabbed her on the 25th of February. And so obviously that was utterly horrific. I had no idea anything to do with what happened to her. I didn't know anything about domestic abuse. I didn't know about the fact that coercive control underpins all abusive relationships. I knew nothing about it. And my wife and I decided that my mum shouldn't go. She was 73, 74 by then, and she was very much of the idea that she must have done something to cause it, and that he was a charming guy, because that's the way coercively controlling people often come across. They love bomb. They seem too good to be true. Well, if they are, then chances are they probably are too good to be true. And then, so my wife and I, Val and I, went to the court in Newcastle in November 2012. And after a 2-week court case where he had been charged with murder, he was convicted of murder by a unanimous jury within 2 hours. And the only excuse that he used was, she'd been on at me all day. So that age-old nagging wife trope. If you want to talk about stereotypes and sex, sex-based stereotypes or whatever. This one, an abusive stereotype, she'd been on at me all day, is what's called the nagging defense. And I didn't really know, after the kind of dust settled from that and we'd kind of got over being in court and seeing his face every day, totally unmoving or occasionally smirking with a slight bit of embarrassment, no remorse. I thought, people only know that they're in a controlling relationship when they're in a controlling relationship. A lot of us don't see what's called the red flags because it seems too good to be true. They seem charming, they seem amazing, and everything works at double speed. You become isolated from your friends and family. Everything happens really quickly. Now, I don't know if that was his intention with Sarah, but the fact that she left her husband and kids, moved 3 hours north to Newcastle, that she became isolated from the family, that she was financially dependent on him for quite a long time, those are three of the first stages that lead to femicide, according to Jane Monckton Smith in her book In Control, which I've become I've become somewhat of an expert in coercive control and domestic violence and domestic abuse, patterns of behaviour.
Yeah.
So that's kind of now why I'm talking quite a lot about dominance-based masculinity, about, I don't like calling it toxic masculinity, but I'll put it out there because, we are talking about toxic behaviours. We'll go on to talk about how the manosphere has kind of instilled in boys the idea that you can't even talk about toxic masculinity without pretending that someone means every type of masculinity. So it isn't, but I call it dominance-based masculinity. This fragility, this inability to take no for an answer, this resentment, this entitlement that many of, not all men, but many, many men have, that they should be able to go up to speak to anybody, they should be able to do whatever they like, and that women's views are kind of optional, or they're there to be kind of challenged and changed and kind of won around. So, and there are a lot of those elements within coercive control.
Well, firstly, I'm so sorry for your loss of Sarah.
Thanks.
But how has Sarah's story and what has happened there changed the way that you started to speak to pupils, schools, and parents?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I realised about the coercive control that when you start Googling someone's behaviour, I saw a meme that said, when you start Googling someone's behaviour, you're in an unhealthy relationship. And another thing that I very often leave young people with when I'm delivering one of my sessions, coercive control, or look what you made me do, it's when you're loved and you're in a healthy relationship, you'll feel loved and cared for. When you're in a controlling relationship or an unhealthy relationship, you'll feel confused. And I think that kind of sums it up. So I realised that I think everyone needs to know about coercive control. And it does happen both ways. Men can be controlled by female partners. It happens in same-sex partnerships. The prevalence is that men are the main perpetrators. Merseyside police found that 92% of people that were reported for and then charged for coercive control were men, and that 74% of victim survivors are women. They also found that 76% of it happens in intimate partner relationships, which means that 24% doesn't. So in friendship groups, in families, in workplaces. I was bullied at work twice, and the patterns of behaviour are exactly the same. I was bullied by both a man and a woman manager, and the behaviours are exactly the same as is used in coercive control within relationships. So I realised it wasn't really my story to tell what happened to Sarah, but then I realised that Sarah deserves to be heard, I think, and Sarah's story deserves to be heard, because when I look through the police reports of what had happened and the stages and the amount of times that there'd been coercive control and abusive behaviour from her partner, because that's another thing we need to be really careful of. Labelling it as an abusive relationship, it's not always bi-directional. So you are in a relationship with an abusive person. So let's put the fault where it belongs. Otherwise, it's very easy to just go, oh, well, there's both sides to this. And very often, sometimes there is, but very often there isn't. Yeah. And I realised that young people embarking on new relationships don't really understand love bombing. They think that's just normal and they think it's lovely. And, a recent research has found that through the Women's Aid survey into influencers and attitudes, found that 21% of people still think men show their love through jealousy. Now, jealousy and rage and not letting you see your friends or being very volatile is another controlling behavior. That kind of look what you made me do to make someone constantly feel like they're walking on eggshells is coercively controlling behavior. And I thought, young people need to understand this. And also I wanted to talk about the kind of prevalence and the scale of male violence against women and girls that leads to femicide. Between 1 and 2 women every week are killed by a male partner. And so I think it's really important that we speak to young people about it. It's hard.
Yeah.
But it's also on the curriculum. Healthy and unhealthy relationships are on the curriculum. And since 2015, coercive control has been a crime in England and Wales. And since 2019, it's been on the RSE curriculum. I've been asked by schools to come in and talk about coercive control because they haven't done it. So, I get it. It's a thorny, difficult topic, but it's on the increase, as we found from the local, the recent Youth Endowment Fund Children Vulnerability and Violence report that came out in December. Of all of the young people aged 13 to 17 that are in relationships, which is about 27%, they found that 49% of them had experienced coercive or controlling or violent behaviour in their partnerships. And the Youth Endowment Fund, they reckon that's 13% of all young people that are experiencing this kind of behaviour. I mean, that's recent research. So I've probably spoken to about 50,000 young people about either what happened to Sarah and coercive control or just coercive control on its own and the impacts that has on teen relationships. So if 13% of young people are experiencing it, that means that by my reckoning, there's at least 10 or between 10 and 13% of young people who are perpetrating it as well. So that's quite a lot. And you could say that, that's a quarter of people, therefore, are involved in relationships where there's unhealthy and, complicated and coercive and often violent behavior.
And these are things that you've been talking about for years.
Yeah.
But obviously they've come to national and global attention in Netflix's Adolescence.
Absolutely.
There have been things happening off the back of that. So Sir Keir Starmer's welcomed Netflix, saying that they can show it for free in secondary schools.
Yeah.
But Jack Thorne, the writer who co-wrote it with Stephen Graham, who plays the dad in the series, has said that things need to go further. There needs to be a digital age of consent, similar to Australia's law banning under 16s for social media.
Yeah.
With all eyes on this topic, the topic of social media, the topic of masculinity, misogyny, what do you think needs to be done in terms of policymakers? Then how does that go down into schools, teaching, the classroom?
Yeah. I think showing it in schools immediately isn't a good idea. It has an age ranking, which means that most of the key stage 3 and 4 students shouldn't see it anyway. Although I think it's vital that young people watch it with their parents. Parents are the key to this. They're one of the keys to this. Because one of the first things that struck me about Adolescence is Stephen Graham's character going, he's 13. He's 13. He's just a normal kid. And that, I think, is really well observed, because there are a whole swathe of parents who really don't know what their kids are watching. They don't know what content young people are seeing. Now, I'm not saying all kids look for it, because Mariana Spring, the BBC social media and conspiracy theorist correspondent, has looked into it. She wrote a brilliant article in September 24 entitled "It Stains Your Brain," where she was talking to loads of young people, and the boys and girls were sent very different things, and that's been kind of proven by other bits of research that she's done with some people that used to work on TikTok monitoring. They found that girls get sent things on pop videos, on makeup, on weight loss and diet plans and that kind of thing. So things that are, again, unhealthy in their own way, but young men will get sent things about violence, misogyny, Andrew Tate style content, Fresh and Fit podcast, that kind of stuff that is the kind of on-ramp towards misogyny, or is very glaringly, obviously misogyny, and violence, knife crime stuff, young people, waving machetes in each other's faces and that kind of stuff. They don't even look for it. So the algorithms, once they find that you are identifying as a teenage boy on your account, University College Dublin also did some research that found it takes around 22 minutes for a young man on their first foray onto a social media platform like Instagram, like X, like TikTok, to be sent content that is misogynistic or violent. So young people may not be looking for it.
Yeah.
And I think to just go, oh, this is toxic masculinity and misogyny, it is like a sledgehammer to crack a nut. And any single one of us who remembers what it's like being a teenager, we had our own language. We wanted to do stuff that our parents didn't know about. We actively were rebelling against things because that's what we're built to do as teenagers. So I think just going, right, we're shutting everything down, we're stopping that, I think that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. So I think we need more parental involvement. So I think schools put on parent chats. I've done a top 10 guide for parents, which I'm sharing with schools. I'm also doing CPD and inset days with a lot of teachers. I suggest that they open it up for parents to come in either in person or on Zoom, because we've had, parents that are cooking the dinner, still zooming in, listening to what's going on. That's vital. It's not to kind of demonize what their young people are doing. It's just to kind of educate the parents and go, it's not guaranteed that young people will be looking at this, but it's very possible. I saw the Trawl podcast the other day, and they were saying, which is a brilliant thing, if there was a man in the park shouting about women are stupid, feminism's gone too far, you should control women, you should, boom, get your machete out and control her and get her working for you on a webcam, you wouldn't let your kids listen to that.
Yeah.
You'd be going, what are you doing? Come here, come away. But yet we give young people unfettered access to the internet in their rooms. And again, we have to be quite careful about this. But as parents, part of your job is not only care, but it's boundaries.
Yeah.
And boundaries include digital boundaries, because the internet doesn't care about your child. The internet only cares about what they're watching and how long they're watching it for. And let's not have a kind of knee-jerk reaction to it, but let's have a kind of open conversation, including parents and young people themselves, that we care about you, we understand you want to rebel, but there are other ways to do it. And let's see what the impact of that is going to be on your relationships, and let's try and keep you safe and keep you happy and keep you healthy.
This podcast is brought to you by The Key. Help your team thrive this term and every term after when you join the 17,000 schools who are already leaning on our trusted support. With everything from need to knows and fact sheets to interactive tools and live leadership classes, we support your whole team to make an impact and navigate the challenges that you face right now. Get immediate access to the comprehensive support your team deserves when you become a whole school member today. Visit thekeysupport.com to find out more. So a lot of our listeners are trust leaders, and trusts naturally have a lot of influence due to the sheer number of trusts and the amount of schools in those trusts.
Yeah.
If you had 5 minutes with a trust CEO, someone who's listening now, what are the sort of actionable things they can do after listening to this, thinking these are the sort of things we can put in place to help the young boys and girls in our schools with these sort of issues?
First of all, acknowledge that it is a real issue. There was some teacher tap responses that came out. I can't remember the statistics.
Actually get the statistics out, because I feel like they really paint the picture. So, BBC News commissioned a survey of more than 6,000 secondary school teachers using Teacher Tap. And they found, it's actually released this morning, so super relevant. So they found that more than a third of secondary school teachers said they are aware of at least one incident of misogynistic behaviour from a pupil in the last week. 1 in 10 secondary school teachers said they are aware of more than 3 incidents of misogyny by pupils in the last week. And the majority of teachers who have been teaching for at least 5 years said they had seen increases in misogynistic behaviour among pupils since they started teaching. And actually, interestingly, nearly half of teachers surveyed wanted more guidance from the government on how to tackle misogyny.
Okay. That's real teachers giving us real feedback in real time that this is an issue. So with the kind of accusation, it was just a drama. Well, it's a drama that's brought it to our attention, which I think is why it's really important. And as I was just saying, schools are the universal service for young people, but they are picking up the issues that have been happening in young people's bedrooms, on social media, with sharing WhatsApp groups and those kind of things. So first of all, don't deny it. Secondly, I'm advocating for 50-50 PSHE leadership and also PSHE delivery, because like Marion Edelman said, if you can't see it, you can't be it. Well, if we haven't got men that are willing to talk about how damaging male violence against women and girls is, to talk about different forms of masculinity with young men, to talk about how important it is to open up ourselves and our feelings and kind of access our feelings and be vulnerable they would call it weak because that's what they've been groomed to believe online, that, showing any form of emotion is weakness. It's like we've gone back kind of 130 years or something to kind of traditional gender roles. So I really do think we need more men talking about the sensitive issues, because teaching is a really interesting profession in terms of its gender balance. I don't know whether you know this. In 2023, 75.5% of the teaching profession, teaching up to the age of 18, are women. There is a gender pay gap of 20.4%, which means that the universal service for children, for all children, is disproportionately making the gender pay gap in the country worse.
Yeah.
Added to that, it's estimated that between 78 and 80% of PSHE teachers are women. Now, if we're going to try and talk about relationships, we're going to talk about relationship and unhealthy behaviours. If you've got young men who have been radicalised towards misogyny and thinking women are stupid and thinking that women should be in the kitchen and writing MMAS on their work, make me a sandwich, and doing the kind of, the Andrew Tate hand symbol behind. So if we're trying to talk, if we're expecting women teachers to talk to young men who've been radicalised towards misogyny about sexism and misogyny and the gender pay gap, and they've already been told it's rubbish, that women lie about false accusations, that they're not going to listen, and it's actually going to make it worse. So I think there's a real argument for having a parity in terms of who delivers PSHE. Now, some schools will do it in forms. Some schools will do it in kind of drop-down sessions. Some schools will have dedicated PSHE teachers and RSE teachers. And some schools will ask me to come in and other people like me to come in and talk about masculinities or relationship difficulties or coercive control, and then they'll be able to pick that up afterwards. But I think it's really important that both men and women are represented in the way that these issues are talked about. What I would also say is listen to young people. There's a brilliant school called St. Michael's in Birmingham, and they have a brilliant student voice organisation. They've got the Am I Manly Enough campaign, where they've given teachers kind of coffee cups for life, which are bright cerise pink, and they've got Am I Manly Enough? So they're opening conversations about what manliness is, and is it manly to wear... I wear pink trainers when I often go in and talk about, stereotypes and misogyny and sexism, because, it's so easy for us to fall into these stereotypes, and none of us chose the way that we represent ourselves as either women or men, but particularly men. We don't choose, I like that bit of masculinity, I like that bit, or I don't like that bit there. We just absorb what we see around us. And while young men are now being kind of told that real men don't need anybody, don't show their emotions, don't talk about your feelings in front of a woman, don't, women lie, women cheat, all this kind of stuff. That's just building on maybe unhealthy masculinity as they've learned from somewhere else as well. So I think listen to students. The student voice campaign there is brilliant. They've also done some videos and got teachers to say, am I manly enough if I wear pink clothes, if I read books by women authors, if I do all the cooking in our house, those kind of things. So they're trying to challenge those stereotypes. Yeah. Another brilliant school called the Castle School in Taunton had a massive crackdown on sexual harassment. They had lots of low-level issues, and they won't mind me talking about it because they've made a massive thing of it. Posters all over the school that said, "It was just a joke. It's just he's only flirting. I was trying to be funny. Oh, it's only a pinch on the bum. No, it's sexual harassment. Yeah. See it, report it. We'll deal with it." So take it seriously, because that's the thin end of the wedge. If young people, young men can think they can get away with flicking a bra strap or touching someone under their skirt, they'll keep doing it.
It's escalating behaviour. So and again, so they've got these posters everywhere. They've created a zero tolerance protocol to sexual harassment. They've dealt with it. They got parents on board. They taught all the teachers how to kind of deal with it properly, made sure the safeguarding team was beefed up so they knew how to cope with it and how to deal with it. And where necessary, they brought in the police because, it may reflect badly on the school if it continued, but the issue is they're being seen to deal with it. And that then has changed the way young people feel about the school. They feel much safer. They also listened to student voice and said, well, there's that area over there which is quite dark, and that's where a lot of it happens. So they've closed off areas that were kind of high points for it. They put in CCTV. So when it happens, if it happens, which it's happening much, much, much less now,
they actually have got a record of who's done it, and they can provide evidence and provide proof. So there's some of the things that I would say. I'd also say start learning about the continuum of harm, which is something that came out of the American military. I'm writing it into my book, From Boys to Men, What Needs to Change, about the language that we use, the terms that we use, the way we behave around the opposite sex. Those things, if they're left untapped, can often lead to escalating behaviour. So I think start to understand that, and start to understand, well, if we stop this now, like with all escalating poor behaviour, like with all, reduced effectiveness in classrooms, like with all kind of management of knowledge acquisition and exam, effort grades and those kind of things, if you nip it in the bud early, then it doesn't escalate negatively, it escalates positively. So they would be the main things I would say.
Feel confident that you're tapping into comprehensive safeguarding support for your whole school community from the only service that supports your DSL and every single member of staff. Join the Key to get complete access to our full suite of safeguarding resources, including our new pupil mental health training and our much-loved, ready-to-use inset pack. Visit safeguarding.thekeysupport.com to find out more. And one of the points you made earlier was around empathy.
Yeah.
How do you think that empathy can disrupt misogyny, and how do we encourage empathy in young boys for themselves and for other people without making them feel judged or attacked?
Yeah. It's one of my kind of hobby horses, if you like, empathy light bulbs. And I was speaking to a friend of mine who used to work for the Violence Reduction Unit in Glasgow, and I came up with this phrase, empathy light bulbs. I said, I think men have an empathy light bulb often when they have a daughter, and they go, before they'd be going, oh yeah, not all men, and then they suddenly go, oh, well, it could be any. Oh. And all of a sudden they own the harms that other men could do. So I like to use the idea of empathy light bulbs to get some preemptive compassion, because I think empathy is an absolutely underpinning framework. And I've seen some schools that actually have it as part of their motto, empathy, leadership, success, those kind of things. And I think that's a really important thing, because empathy allows us to show care and kindness and love for other people, whether we know them or not. And stereotypes are the opposite of empathy, because we can just go, oh, that's what they're like because they're wearing those clothes, or they've had that experience, or they're talking about this, therefore they're that kind of person, or they're a woman, therefore they're a man, therefore. And I think talking about stereotyping, talking about sexism, talking about feminism, I think is vital. And we can come on to that in a minute if you want to. And empathy, I think, is absolutely vital.
And Gareth Southgate recently did a really amazing speech. And one of the stats in that really shocked me. He said that more young boys have a smartphone in their household than a father. And he was speaking about role models and positive male role models. And I think that's one of the reasons that young boys get sucked into the manosphere, looking for that role model, looking for that person to look up to. Where should young boys be finding these role models, and who should these role models be, and what should they model?
Well, there's loads of questions there. But I think you're right. And I think it was really good that Gareth Southgate said that. As a result of that, I put a post on Threads and I said, what other sporting male role models could we have? Because I think a lot of people, seemingly a lot of men, still have a grudge against Gareth Southgate for missing that penalty in Euro 96. When he became England manager, there was loads of people going, oh, he's useless, he's a serial loser. He got England to loads more tournaments than before. He brought young players on amazingly. There's an incredible photo I use in my workshop where he's kind of embracing and supporting Saka after Saka missed the penalty. I mean, that's empathy in action. He knows exactly what it feels like to miss a penalty, and he's kind of saying, look, don't let this define you. This is one thing that's happened. And in that photo, he's also being watched by 3 of the officials in bright pink shirts. So I really like that, the way it kind of challenges loads of stereotypes in one. But when I put that thread up saying there were so many people saying, well, he's a wet lettuce. Why would you support Southgate? He's useless. And all of the abusive comments were from men. Lots of them were things like, Mike Tyson is still the greatest of all time, even though he was convicted of rape and served time in prison for it, even though he bit someone's ear off in the ring. they still, people were still arguing that he was a better role model than Gareth Southgate. So we've got a long way to go for parents, to be perfectly honest, and adult men, using this kind of aggressive comeback. It's very, very common. So in terms of role models, first of all, be one. Be one. Start challenging other men when they tell sexist jokes. Say, we don't do that round here. John Amici says, culture is defined by the worst behaviour we tolerate. So if men can create cultures where other men are openly misogynistic and horrible to women and, sexist and abusive towards women, then we as men are responsible for creating cultures within which that doesn't happen. So first of all, where are the role models? We're all them. If we're adult men, then we are all role models. But I would look to people like Loyal Kana, someone who was, involved in fighting, lost his brother, came heavily involved in violence, turned his back on it, has become a massive advocate for peace, learned about his ADHD, has cooking schools for young people with ADHD. His music is some of the most beautiful and incredible and poetic and powerful music about fatherhood, about young fatherhood, about how him and his friends used to talk about how difficult it is to grow up as a young man particularly as a young black man in Britain. He's a brilliant role model. Ted Lasso is a brilliant fictional role model, and loads of the players within that, they talk about sexting, they talk about the importance of deleting people's nudes if you stop going out with them anymore, not sending them to other people. And there's a lot of really strong women in that show, so I think that's a really, really brilliant show to start talking about it. I would say Jordan Stevens as well. He's good. I've read his book. He does quite a lot of stuff around masculinity and opening up discussions about it. I think there's a lot of great people, but they don't always make the news because we like to demonize other people. I mean, demonize, let's place blame where it's supposed to be. And a lot of those shouty pod bros, a lot of those kind of manosphere influences are a malign influence. And I quite agree with you. We shouldn't give their names any more focus. But I think increasing the influence of more powerful role models, I think, is really important. But the first place to find role models is in yourself as a man. Challenge your own beliefs. Is it right that women should be paid less? Is it right that, women shouldn't be in control, in power? We're still miles away from parity in loads of different places. I mean, in 1989, I think it was, there were 3.5% of MPs were women. We're now at 36%. But at the current rate of change, 3% a year, it's still going to be 25 years, 5 parliaments before we reach parity, without taking into account the amount of abuse and harassment that female MPs get on social media. So that may not come to pass. We've still got a massive gender pay gap across about 10% across all roles. And things like 92% of women in a recent Adidas survey don't feel safe to go exercising outdoors. There's 3 elements of feminism where we're not anywhere near far enough. One's economic, one's political, and one is social. And that's how true equality will be measured according to feminism. We're a million miles from it. So let's have more male feminists, more people that want to say, that's wrong, and here's what I'm doing to change it.
In episode 4 of Adolescence, the final episode, there's a really powerful scene where Jamie's parents have sat in their bedroom crying, upset, saying, what could we have done, and then they said, they reflected on their daughter and said, we raised the 2 children, they've gone different directions, like, is there anything we could have done? A lot of parents would have been watching that thinking, oh my word, like, is there something we can do? And if there is, what is that? What would your response be to that?
I mean, at the risk of sounding like a kind of 1980s politician saying we need family values, what I think is really important is, as I said before, boundaries and care are a parent's main job. They're also a teacher's main job. I would add sarcasm to a parent's job because one of the things I found about being a young man, I took myself very seriously. And if you're a bit grounded and you can see humour in yourself, then that stops you getting into a lot of fights, because a lot of male peacocking is about being seen as hard and serious. So they're my 3 top tips for parents: boundaries, care, and sarcasm. But the care bit is really important because they know you love them, but the boundaries are where we have to make difficult choices. And with a recent survey that's come out that said 1 in 10 11-year-olds have seen porn. And it's not just the top shelf stuff that we used to find by, in carrier bags next to where the truckers used to stop. This is violent. This is sexualized violence. I think we need to have a really big discussion about increasing the age at which young people have smartphones. And I think there is massive peer pressure. And I think that secondary school moment when they go to secondary school, that's almost a kind of a de rigueur thing. Everyone has to have one. Well, do they? Because I think it's really, really, really important that we do have these conversations with parents, and parents kind of limiting their young people's ability to access the internet in their rooms, in their, and also we found that at least 50%, surveys say that at least 50% of UK adults watch porn. So are many parents going to want to restrict their own internet access? Well, sometimes the bigger picture is more important. So, yeah, we've had EE doing adverts where parents can now shut off, Sophie's iPad or whatever. They're now saying, yeah, we've let you have everything, but now you can put the genie back in the bottle. Well, I think that's really difficult to do, but I really think it's important to do. So a couple of things for parents. Try and delay the point at which your young people have smartphones. Try and get into the habit of allowing them to look in your phone. You can have a phone, but as long as I can check it every week. Check in WhatsApp groups and stuff like that, because that's a lot where a lot of the poison comes from. Like I said, a lot of young people don't necessarily search for this stuff, but they will find it, and their mates sending them things. And also having that conversation with them about, you have a right not to see this. And if your friends keep sending you this, you have a right to kind of withdraw yourself from the chat, or actually say, I can't be friends if you keep doing this. So there's a number of ways of kind of empowering our young people to be more confident and be more outspoken. But again, there's lots of peer pressure involved in it. So I think parents do have a role. And also just that kind of, they'll be all right. They're in their room. They're safe.
Well, that's what they said. We thought he was safe.
He's
in
13.
his room.
We thought he was safe. I've got some pretty simple tools. One, don't charge your phones in your room overnight. That includes parents. Buy an alarm clock, charge them downstairs. I mean, we've had stories of kids charging their phones under their pillows with rubbishy leads and them catching fire. Also, some children sleep with their phone in their hand, and when it buzzes, they wake up to look at it. Their sleep is awful. They're going to bed late. Teachers will also tell you that loads of the beef and issues that they have at school happens because young people are on their phones at night, late into the night, arguing and saying things to each other and liking each other's stuff where they shouldn't do, and that kind of stuff. So it causes a lot of hassle when young people are too immature to deal with what's actually happening. So charge your phones downstairs, including yours. Have a meal at the table. And again, this sounds very like family values, but put your phones down, not even yours as adults. 42% of kids in an American survey said their parents are often distracted by their phones. Well, I mean, that's a bit rich coming from teenagers. However, it shows that we are also addicted. Work is bleeding into our private lives. We need to be the ones that say, we need to role model this. And role modeling, I think, is vital for young people. So they'll hear what you say, but then they'll watch what you do. And I think that's really, well, they might not even hear what you say. They might not even listen to what you say, but they'll watch what you do. And if you're on your phone because you've got to make one more important call, or you've got to just write an email, they're not going to think it's anything weird, to be on their phone all the time. So role model better, sit around the table, have a chat. What was the best part of your day? What was the worst part of your day? What would you do differently? What was the most boring part of your day? And all get involved in it. Charge your phones downstairs and just kind of disconnect from technology every now and again. Try and be a home where it isn't the only thing you do.
Yeah, that's good advice.
I think it's also vital that parents don't feel like they're on their own with this. And I don't know whether you could have some kind of school parent partnership where you could get parents in and say, we want to talk to you about the realities of what your young people are doing. We encourage you to reduce the amount of, to kind of extend the age by which they get a phone, because not only does it disrupt their learning, it disrupts their sleep. And here's the science behind it from places like Children and Screens is a brilliant American institute, the Pew Research Institute as well. There's loads of really good research into how damaging it is for young people to have screens all the time. So try and do this kind of parent school charter almost that says we'll support one another. And let's be honest, none of us are in control of what young people are seeing, But if we put some boundaries in, if we understand the harms of them looking at this kind of stuff, then let's both be having this honest conversation so that the teachers don't feel that they're having to pick up things that they don't necessarily need to, but also that the parents feel informed and that the school really does want to form a partnership, that it's not a nanny state, that we are there as educators to help you as parents. Because none of us signed up, none of us did a job description, none of us got the job of parent. We just became a parent and we learn it.
Wow, that's brought us to the end of the podcast. I mean, I could speak to you all day long about this topic. I mean, it's so complex, it's so layered, but I really think that you've given some really tangible things that people can go away and listen to and like move forward with. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Before I let you go, we do a quick fire at the end of every podcast. So keep it quick, keep it snappy. So question number 1, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing the education sector right now?
I'm going to say inequality in terms of teachers, because it's still a fairly white profession. It's still a fairly female-dominated profession, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing that women are dominating in a profession, but I think for the universal service for young people, I think we need more 50-50 representation, certainly in leadership and certainly in PSHE.
Second question, what motivates you on your difficult days?
That's a really good question. I think because this stuff's bigger than me, it's bigger than you, it's bigger than any of us. And I think I've had some really horrible things happen to me. And some of them I've done myself. Cancer wasn't my fault, but I had it and I've dealt with it. Getting in trouble with the police was my fault. And if I can, and what happened to Sarah was horrific, but if I can educate young people from the trauma and damage that I've suffered and my family's suffered, then that's something that's what gets me out of bed every day. And that's what leads me to have these difficult conversations with young people. That's why I want to help teachers to support young people the best way they can. So I suppose that's my purpose, to be perfectly honest. That's me. There's a bigger reason I'm here than just, making money and what have you. I don't make enough of that.
Question number 3, what has been your proudest achievement in your career so far?
I think publishing that book, The Ladder, with Crown House, and then them asking me if I would write one on this topic, on the topic of dominance-based masculinity. I had a go during lockdown at writing another book, which is called Back Row Boys, which is kind of my experience. Why I wrote it under a pseudonym of Jamie Stone, I have no idea, but it is me. And they're kind of 4 of the main stories I tell about, getting into lots of trouble and stuff. And I've fictionalized it so I think, in terms of work, I think it's writing books that people seem to like. Personal life, being happily married and having 2 amazing daughters.
Amazing. Doesn't get better than that, does it?
It doesn't.
And question number 4, the final question. What are you most looking forward to this year?
Publishing my book. And I think the difficult conversations that we won't be shying away from anymore. And hopefully my book will allow teachers, parents, and young people to have really open conversations about empathy, about kindness, about stereotyping, about sexism, and help young people to see that what they've been sold as the solution to their problems through the manosphere, that feminism's gone too far and we need to kind of rein women back in, is just garbage, and that everybody is happier when we're more equal. The most happy countries in the world, places like New Zealand, Finland, and some of the Scandinavian countries, are not only the happiest, they're also the most equal. So feminism and equality helps us all. You've been sold a lie if you've been told that women have had too much.
And that's a perfect way to end, I think, on that note. Thank you so much, Bernie. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's super important. And I praise you for doing this work because, it will change people's lives and hopefully the bigger picture and the world eventually.
Thank you so much, Ellie. I've really loved it. Thanks.
That brings us to the end of what has been a deeply important and timely conversation. Bernie's message is clear. We have the power to challenge harmful ideas, but only if we act with courage, care, and consistency. If you are affected by any of the topics in this episode and need some support, you can find a list of organisations in the description below. A huge thank you to Bernie for sharing his insight and his mission. If you were moved by today's episode, please share it widely and start a conversation in your leadership team. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time.